It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when I got the call. I had just returned to my apartment after a long day at work. The last thing I expected was for my phone to ring with a number I didn't recognize. I had been living in the city for 5 years, and my childhood home, the house where I grew up, was about a 3-hour drive away. My parents had moved out of it a year ago, downsizing to a smaller place closer to the city. But that house, the one on Elm Street, had always been mine in my heart. Even if I wasn't living there anymore, it felt like a part of me. I picked up the phone absently, thinking it was probably a wrong number or a telemarketer. But when I heard the voice on the other end, I knew something was off. "Hello, is this Miss Linda Hartman?" "Yes, speaking." I hesitated. "Who's calling?" "This is David Wheeler from Greenview Realty. I'm calling in reference to the property on Elm Street that you've listed with us. I just wanted to confirm that you are aware of the recent developments with the sale." I froze. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My childhood home. Listed with them. Sale. "I'm sorry, I think there's been some mistake," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I didn't list any property with your agency. That's my parents' house. I'm not sure why." "Oh, I'm terribly sorry for the confusion. It's just that we've recently closed the sale on the property, and I wanted to make sure you had all the information you needed regarding the transaction," he continued, oblivious to the shock and disbelief in my voice. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "Close the sale?" I repeated, feeling my breath catch. "You've sold the house?" "Yes, the house was sold last week. I can send you the details if you'd like, but everything has been finalized." A feeling of panic started to rise in me. I could hear my heart beating in my ears, louder and louder with each passing second. I hadn't heard anything about a sale. My parents had never mentioned it. How could they have done this without even telling me? "Wait," I said, forcing myself to stay calm despite the sudden rush of anger building up inside me. "Could you please hold for a moment?" "Of course, take your time." I put the phone on hold and sat on the edge of my couch. My mind raced, spinning with confusion and frustration. What did this mean? How could they have sold it without telling me? It didn't make sense. It wasn't just a house. It was our family's history. It was where I had grown up, where my brothers and I had spent our childhood, where I had countless memories of birthdays, holidays, and long summer nights in the backyard. That house was the one constant in my life. My parents had always said it would stay in the family, that it would be there for us whenever we needed it. So why hadn't they told me? I grabbed my phone and quickly dialed my mom's number. It rang twice before she picked up. "Hi, honey. How are you?" she asked cheerfully, as though there were nothing out of the ordinary. "I'm fine, Mom, but I just got a call from some real estate agent, and they told me you sold the house." There was a long pause on the other end. For a moment, I thought the line had cut off. Then my mother sighed. "Oh, honey, we've been meaning to talk to you about that," she said in a calm but somewhat distant tone. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I could feel my chest tightening. Not that big of a deal. It's my childhood home. How could you sell it without telling me first? She sighed again. "Linda, we just didn't think you'd be interested in it anymore. You've got your own life in the city, and the house was just too much for us to maintain. We've downsized. We thought you'd understand." I felt my throat close up as I tried to process her words. This was happening too quickly. "You thought I wouldn't care?" I asked, my voice cracking. "That house wasn't just some property to me, Mom. It was my home. It was our family's home. We didn't want to burden you with it, sweetie," she said, sounding a little defensive now. "It was just getting to be too much. We needed a fresh start, and this is the best thing for us." The words hit me like a slap across the face. A fresh start? For them, the house was just a burden. They didn't understand. To them, it was just bricks and mortar, just an investment, just something they could cash in on. But for me, it was everything. It was the place where I had learned to ride my bike, where I had spent countless hours sitting on the porch talking to my friends, where I had first fallen in love. It wasn't just a house, it was my entire history. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling, "you should have told me." "I would have. I didn't want to make you feel guilty, Linda," she interrupted. "It wasn't about you. It was about us." The conversation didn't go much further. She tried to explain again how the sale was the best decision for them, And I tried to understand, but the truth was I couldn't. It didn't make sense to me. I had always believed that the house was something we would hold on to as a family, something that would be there when we needed it. I had thought someday, maybe I would be the one to take it over, to bring my own family back there, to make new memories. After hanging up, I felt numb. The shock was still settling in, and I was in disbelief. How could my parents have made such a huge decision without involving me? Without even giving me a chance to say goodbye to the house that had meant everything to me. The phone call from the real estate agent had been the first time I had even heard about the sale. How had they thought I wouldn't care? I spent the rest of the evening in a fog, replaying the conversation over and over in my mind. I tried to talk myself into being understanding, into acknowledging that my parents had their reasons. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. The house was sold. My childhood was gone, and I was left feeling helpless. The next morning I couldn't focus at work. All I could think about was the house, the front yard, the old oak tree in the backyard, the kitchen with the little window where my mother had always stood to look out at the garden. It felt like my connection to everything I had once known was slipping through my fingers. And the worst part was my parents didn't seem to care. They didn't seem to understand why it mattered so much to me. I decided then and there that I wouldn't just let this go. I didn't know how or when, but I would find a way to take the house back. Somehow I would make it mine again. I couldn't let the place where I had grown up fall into the hands of strangers. There had to be something I could do. Little did I know this was only the beginning of a long and emotional journey. A journey that would test my relationship with my parents and ultimately change everything I thought I knew about home, family, and what it truly meant to hold on to the past. The following weeks after the phone call felt like a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in some kind of nightmare, one that I couldn't escape. The house was gone, just like that, sold without my knowledge, without any warning. My parents had moved on, or so it seemed, and I was left to deal with the wreckage of something I hadn't expected. I couldn't simply accept it. I couldn't just let it go. At first, I tried to convince myself that it didn't matter. After all, I hadn't lived there for years. The house wasn't really mine anymore, right? It was just a place, a structure, a collection of rooms and walls. But that line of thinking didn't last long. The more I tried to ignore it, the more it gnawed at me. The house wasn't just a building. It was my childhood, my memories, my sense of home. It had been the one constant throughout my life, and now it was gone, sold to strangers who would never understand what it had meant to me. I'd always been close with my parents, but this felt different. They had made a decision that affected me deeply, and they hadn't even bothered to tell me. I tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe they thought I wouldn't care. Maybe they didn't realize how important the house was to me. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. They knew what it meant to me. My mom had always told me it would stay in the family. For as long as I could remember, they had talked about keeping the house in the family. And yet they had sold it without any discussion, without even consulting me. It felt like a betrayal. I couldn't let go of the sense of injustice. I couldn't just sit back and accept that the house was gone. I wasn't sure what exactly I was going to do, but I knew one thing for certain. I would find a way to get it back. There had to be something I could do. I spent the next few days obsessing over the sale. I called the real estate agent who had initially reached out to me. His name was David Wheeler, and though his tone had been polite, I could hear the indifference in his voice. He didn't understand why it mattered so much to me. To him, it was just a transaction. He had assured me that everything was finalized, that the new owners had already taken possession. But that didn't matter to me. If there was any chance, any opportunity, for me to reclaim what was rightfully mine, I was going to pursue it. I spent hours researching the property, digging into every detail of the sale. I pulled up the transaction records, the buyer's details, the final sale price. Every piece of information I could get my hands on. I scoured the local property listings, checking every site that might have information about it. I wanted to know who had bought the house, where they were from, what their intentions were. I wasn't sure what I hoped to find, but I couldn't help myself. The idea that someone else was living in my childhood home filled me with a deep sense of discomfort, almost like an invasion. After a few days, I found the information I was looking for. The house had been sold to a couple, James and Carol Thompson, who had relocated from a neighboring town. According to the records, they had no plans to do anything major with the property. They were apparently looking for a quiet place to settle down, and Elm Street had seemed like the perfect spot. But that didn't matter to me. What mattered was that they were now living in a place that was supposed to be mine. I had a choice to make. I could let it go, accept that my childhood home was no longer in the family, and try to move on with my life. Or I could do whatever it took to get it back. It didn't take long for me to make my decision. I couldn't let go of the idea of owning that house again. I couldn't bear the thought of someone else calling it home. The memories, the history, it was all tied up in that place. And I was going to do whatever I could to get it back. I didn't care what it took. But first I had to figure out how to make it happen. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. The house had already been sold, and the Thompsons had already taken possession. They were now the rightful owners, and I didn't have any legal grounds to take the property from them. But that didn't mean I was giving up. There had to be a way to make it work. I started by consulting with a real estate attorney. I knew that if I was going to have any chance at reclaiming the house, I would need to understand my legal rights. The lawyer, a woman named Sarah Donnelly, was kind but blunt. She didn't sugarcoat the situation. "You've been dealt a difficult hand," she said when I explained the situation. "Your parents sold the house, and now it belongs to someone else. Unless you have a legal claim, something like a family trust or a formal agreement stating that the house was supposed to be passed down to you, you don't have much of a case." I felt a wave of despair wash over me as she spoke. There it was, reality. The house was gone, and there was nothing I could do. But Sarah wasn't done yet. That said, she continued, "You do have options. If the new owners are open to it, you could always try to buy the house back. I can help you with that." The idea of buying the house back hadn't crossed my mind at first. But as Sarah explained the process, it made sense. I had some savings, and though it wasn't enough to cover the full cost of the house, I could probably get a loan to make up the difference. If I acted quickly, I might be able to secure the property before the Thompsons settled in too deeply. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. I decided to take it. I immediately reached out to the real estate agent, David Wheeler, and asked him to set up a meeting with the Thompsons. I wasn't sure if they would be willing to sell, but I had to try. The idea of buying the house back seemed like my only option. If I didn't, I would lose it forever. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I gathered all the financial documents I would need to secure a loan, and I prepared myself for the difficult conversation ahead. I wasn't sure how the Thompsons would react when I explained my situation, but I was prepared for anything. If I had to, I would offer to pay above market value. I would do whatever it took to get that house back. The day of the meeting arrived, and I found myself standing outside the house on Elm Street once again. It looked different somehow. The yard wasn't as tidy as I remembered, and the once familiar front door seemed foreign. But the house was still standing, still there, and I was determined to make it mine again. When the Thompsons arrived, I could tell they were confused by my presence. David Wheeler had briefed them on the situation, but I don't think they fully understood why I was there. I explained the situation, told them about my connection to the house, and asked if they would be willing to sell it back to me. The response wasn't what I had hoped for. They were polite, but they were also firm. They had bought the house with the intention of making it their home, and they weren't interested in selling. I tried to explain how much the house meant to me, how it wasn't just a property to me. It was my history, my memories. But they were resolute. "I'm sorry," James Thompson said, "but we've already made plans. We've settled here, and we're not looking to sell." It was a blow, but I didn't give up. I asked if they would be open to discussing a higher offer. I told them I could come up with more money, even if it meant getting a second mortgage. But the Thompsons weren't interested. They weren't going to sell. I left the meeting feeling defeated, but I wasn't ready to give up just yet. I had to think of another way to make this happen. I would find a solution. I wasn't going to let go of this house that easily. I had made a decision. I would fight for it. And no matter what, I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers without a fight. The days that followed the rejection were harder than I could have imagined. The Thompsons had refused to sell the house back to me, no matter what price I offered. For them, it was just another real estate transaction, another house to settle into. For me, it was everything. I had been so certain that I could reclaim the house, that somehow I could find a way to make it mine again. But now, with the Thompsons firmly entrenched as the new owners, I had to face the harsh reality. The house wasn't mine anymore. I spent nights pacing around my apartment, staring at the walls, replaying every conversation I'd had with the real estate agent and the Thompsons. I even went back to the house one evening, standing on the sidewalk across the street, staring up at the familiar roofline, trying to figure out how I had ended up in this situation. I couldn't understand why the Thompsons wouldn't sell. I wasn't asking for much, just to have back what had once been mine. But there was nothing I could do. The property was theirs. Yet, despite everything, the thought of giving up on the house felt impossible. It had been so much more than just a building to me. It was where I had spent my childhood, where I had first learned to walk, where my brothers and I had fought and made up, where we'd spent endless summer afternoons in the backyard, pretending to be superheroes, racing around in our little bikes. My memories lived within those walls, and I couldn't bear the thought of someone else making their memories there. So I did what I could only think to do next. I reached out to the Thompsons again. I wasn't ready to give up. I wasn't going to walk away from this without a fight. I called David Wheeler, the same real estate agent who had first told me about the sale. I had kept in touch with him, trying to keep my options open, trying to understand if there was any chance, no matter how slim, that I could buy the house back. This time, I asked him to set up another meeting with the Thompsons. I wasn't sure what I was going to say to them, but I was determined to try again. The next week, I was back on Elm Street, standing in front of the house once again. This time, I wasn't just a visitor. I was a woman with a purpose. When the Thompsons arrived, they seemed surprised to see me again. I couldn't blame them. They had made their decision, and it had seemed final. But I wasn't ready to accept it. Not yet. I know this isn't easy for you. I began when we sat down, trying to sound calm despite the storm brewing inside me. But I need you to understand, this house isn't just a house to me. It's my family's history. It's where I grew up. I'm not asking you to sell it back because of the money. I'm asking because it means more to me than anything else. The Thompsons exchanged glances. They had heard me say something similar before, but I had to make them understand the depth of my feelings. I understand that this is your home now, I continued, but I can't just walk away from the house where I spent my childhood. I'm not trying to disrupt your life, but I need to know that you understand why this is so important to me. James Thompson looked uncomfortable. Carol, his wife, had remained silent, watching me with an unreadable expression. After a long pause, James finally spoke. We appreciate that this place means a lot to you, he said, his tone soft but firm. But we've already moved in, and we're settled here. We really don't want to sell. I could feel the frustration building inside me, but I kept my composure, trying to sound reasonable. I'm not asking you to make a decision you're not comfortable with, I said. I'm asking you to think about what it would mean to me, and to consider what might happen if we came to some sort of arrangement. I paused, giving them time to think. I'm willing to pay a higher price. A fair price, one that reflects the value of this house to me. Not just to you as the new owners. I've saved money for years and I can get a loan if I need to. If that's what it takes, I'll do it. I just can't let go of the idea of this house belonging to someone else. There was another long silence. James and Carol exchanged another look, and I could see that they were conflicted. They hadn't expected me to come back with such determination. But at the same time, I could see that they were still hesitant. I don't think you understand, Carol finally spoke, her voice calm but resolute. We didn't buy this house just to make a profit. We bought it because we wanted a fresh start. This is where we plan to live for the rest of our lives. We're not interested in selling, and we don't want to be pressured into doing something we're not comfortable with. Her words stung, but I couldn't back down now. I'm not trying to pressure you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I just need you to understand how much this house means to me. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance to get back what's mine. To get back what was taken from me without my knowledge. David Wheeler, who had been silently observing the conversation, cleared his throat. Maybe there's another way to approach this, he said, breaking the silence. Perhaps there's room for negotiation. If you're willing to meet their price and agree to their terms, we could find a middle ground. It was clear to me that David was trying to mediate, but his suggestion felt like a small temporary fix. What I really wanted was for the Thompsons to understand the emotional weight of this situation. This wasn't just about money. This was about my past, my memories, and the house that had always been home. But I knew that if I kept pushing too hard, I might lose my chance completely. "We'll think about it," James said, his voice steady but tired. "But right now, I don't think we're ready to make a decision." That was it. The meeting ended soon after, with no agreement reached. I left feeling defeated, yet I still couldn't give up. I wasn't ready to stop fighting. For the next few days, I weighed my options. I had to be strategic. I couldn't afford to alienate the Thompsons, but I also couldn't let go of this house without giving it one final effort. I started looking into every legal avenue I could take. I reached out to a few property specialists, looking for any loopholes, any options that might allow me to legally compel the Thompsons to sell. But every avenue I explored seemed to lead to dead ends. Without a formal agreement or some other claim on the property, I had no legal standing. I started to feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. It was as though I was drowning in the uncertainty of it all. Each day I would wake up with a new plan, only to watch it fall apart before the end of the day. It was one evening, while sitting in my apartment and reflecting on everything that had happened, that I realized something important. I wasn't going to get the house back through force, through legal threats, or through emotional manipulation. I needed to approach this from a different angle. I began to think about the emotional impact of the house on the Thompsons. They had bought it because they wanted to start fresh, to build their own memories there. What if, instead of trying to force them to sell, I showed them the house's value in a different way? What if I could convince them that it would mean more to me than it ever could to them? Maybe then they would understand. The next day, I called David Wheeler again. I told him that I wanted to try something different. I asked him to arrange a meeting with the Thompsons where I could tell them my story, not just about the house, but about my memories and the reasons why I needed it back. I wasn't going to focus on money or pressure. I was going to ask them to see the house for what it was, a place of significance, a place where a family's history was embedded in every brick and every beam. David agreed, and the meeting was set for the following week. I didn't know if this new approach would work, but I was out of options. This was my last chance to make the Thompsons see why the house meant so much to me, and perhaps finally my last chance to take it back. The days leading up to the final meeting felt like they stretched on forever. I couldn't focus on anything else. My thoughts constantly drifted back to Elm Street, to the house that once held everything I had ever known. It felt like my entire life was tied to those four walls, and despite every obstacle, I couldn't imagine letting it go. My parents had sold it, yes, but that was their decision, not mine. And now I had a chance to fight for it, even if I had no legal claim, even if I was battling against people who had no emotional attachment to it. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about property or contracts or legal documents. This was about something deeper. I had spent days reflecting on my relationship with that house, thinking about all the family gatherings, the birthdays, the summer evenings spent with my brothers in the backyard, and the nights lying awake in my childhood bedroom, feeling safe and at home. It was more than just bricks and wood. It was a vessel for my memories, a place where everything I had known was wrapped up, protected, and stored for me to return to, at least in my mind. Now it was in the hands of strangers, and I couldn't stand it. I had to make them see that. The Thompsons hadn't given me a concrete answer the last time we spoke, but I knew they were conflicted. They weren't bad people. They were just trying to build a life for themselves as anyone would. They had come to the house with their own dreams, their own vision for their future. But what they didn't understand was that this house wasn't just a place for me. It was a piece of my soul, and I was going to make them understand that. The meeting was set for a Wednesday morning. I woke up early, determined to be clear-headed, calm, and composed. I needed to come across as sincere, not desperate, not frantic. I needed to be strong but not aggressive. I had learned over the past few weeks that the best way to fight for what I wanted wasn't through threats or manipulation, but through a genuine appeal. I needed to make the Thompsons understand what it meant to me. I arrived at the house early. It was a little surreal, standing on the same sidewalk that had once been so familiar. Everything was still the same, yet somehow, Everything had changed. The flowers my mom had once planted in the front garden were wilting in the summer heat, and the grass that I had once mowed was now overgrown, the yard looking tired, neglected. The house stood quietly, its front door now painted a different shade of blue than it had been in my memory. The picket fence my dad had spent so many weekends fixing was now crooked, the wood splintered in places. I leaned against my car, staring at the house and letting my thoughts run wild. What would happen if they refused to sell again? What if they just didn't care, no matter what I said? Could I really live with the fact that I might never see this place again? That someone else might carve their own history into these walls? David Wheeler, the real estate agent, arrived first, followed by the Thompsons. As I watched them walk up the driveway, I realized that they were probably feeling a little uneasy. I had asked for this meeting, and while I had been polite in all our past interactions, they had to know that I wasn't coming here to talk about anything else but the house. They had to know that I was willing to do whatever it took to make this happen. James and Carol were both dressed casually, but there was a sense of tension in their posture. Carol's arms were crossed over her chest, and James had his hands shoved into his pockets. They were standing on the porch when I walked up, and as I approached, I could see that they were both preparing themselves for the conversation that was about to unfold. "I appreciate you meeting with me again," I said as I walked up to them. My voice was steady, but there was a nervous edge to it that I couldn't quite hide. I had rehearsed my words 1,000 times, but it was different now, standing in front of them. "We understand why you're here," James said. His voice was calm, though I could sense a hint of wariness. "We don't want to keep you from something that clearly means a lot to you. But we've made our decision, and we'd prefer not to revisit it." "I understand," I replied, my voice measured. "I know it's been a while since we last talked, and I respect your decision. But I need you to hear me out. I'm not asking you to make an emotional decision. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me. I just need you to understand why this house is so important to me." I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. I could feel my heart beating fast in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to be clear, to speak from the heart. "When I was growing up," I began, "this house wasn't just a place to sleep or eat or live. It was everything. It was where we spent our holidays, where we laughed, cried, fought, and made up. It was the place where I learned about life, about family, and about who I wanted to be. Every corner of this house has a memory attached to it. Every room, every hallway, every staircase. I'm not just asking you to sell a house. I'm asking you to understand that for me, this place holds everything that made me who I am today." I looked at both of them as I spoke, watching their faces carefully. James seemed to be listening, but Carol's expression was hard to read. She wasn't looking at me, instead focusing on the ground beneath her feet. "I'm not asking you to give up your dream of living here. I'm not trying to take something away from you," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I just want the chance to make my own memories again. This house is part of me. I don't want to let go of that." I paused again, searching their faces. There was no immediate response, just silence. I felt my stomach twist with nerves, but I couldn't back down now. This was my chance. After what felt like an eternity, Carol finally spoke. "I get it," she said quietly. "I understand how you feel. This place, it's not just bricks and mortar to you. But we've started our life here. We've made plans. We've invested in this house, both emotionally and financially. I don't know if we can just walk away from it." "I'm not asking you to walk away," I said, my voice soft. "But I want to make you an offer. I know I can't buy it from you for the same price you paid, but I can offer more. I'm willing to pay above the market value. I'm asking for your help in understanding how much this means to me. I want to give you something for what you've started here. Something that makes this work for everyone." James was silent for a moment, then looked at Carol. "We didn't think about it that way," he said quietly. "I think we've been so focused on making this place our own, that we didn't realize it could mean so much to someone else." There was another long silence, and then unexpectedly, Carol spoke again. "We're not saying yes right now," she said. "But we'll think about it. We'll discuss it and let you know." I felt a sense of relief flood over me, but I knew better than to get my hopes up too soon. This wasn't over yet, but the fact that they were willing to consider my offer, that they weren't dismissing me outright, gave me a sliver of hope. It wasn't the answer I had wanted, but it was a step in the right direction. I appreciate it, I said, managing a smile. Thank you for being willing to hear me out. The meeting ended on a somewhat uncertain note, with no definitive answer. As I left the house that day, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had said everything I needed to say. Now it was up to the Thompsons to make their decision. And though I wasn't sure where that would lead, I knew that I had done everything in my power to get the house back. Days passed without a word from the Thompsons, and I tried to distract myself, focusing on work and my own life. But the house was never far from my thoughts. It was like a ghost that haunted me, waiting to either haunt me forever or to return to its rightful owner. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, I received a call from David Wheeler. My heart raced as I picked up the phone. We've decided to sell, he said, his voice steady. The Thompsons have agreed to your offer. I felt a wave of relief crash over me. I had won. The house was coming back to me. The transaction wasn't smooth sailing from that point. It took time for everything to be finalized. There were legalities, paperwork, and formalities. But in the end, the house was mine again. And as I stood in front of it once more, the key to the door in my hand, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I had fought for it, and I had won. The Thompsons moved out, and though it was bittersweet for them, I understood their decision. They had made a life here. But in the end, they recognized the importance of the house to me. It was my family's history, my memories, my home. And now, I could finally begin to write the next chapter of my life within its walls. I walked through the house one last time, each room bringing back memories of a time long past. The walls, the floors, the windows, they all felt familiar, but they also felt like a new beginning. This was no longer just the house of my childhood. It was the house of my future. I had fought for it, and now it was finally mine again.